It's just too nice to leave here. The wind's picking up a little bit, but it's still been beautiful. Haven't seen any animals. Be kind of nice to see a little bit of wildlife today. Still have my bear spray handy. Aren't those mountains beautiful? This is why I come out to these spots, because I figure when I tell these stories about faith and hope, what grander backscape or backdrop could you have than this? This is where I feel closer to God. It's just so beautiful. Well, I had one last one that I figure I'd do before I head home. This is a heartbreaking story in some ways, in other ways not, obviously. But it's about a little boy who was 80 years old who suffered a massive stroke. I don't know about you, but I have 4 children, and a stroke is something I never would have considered a child having. Though I did know someone who was in his teens who suffered a stroke when I was growing up. But anyhow, let me just locate it here. Okay. It was a September day in Knoxville, Tennessee. Andrew Franklin rode his bike as his father Tom looked on. Neither knew that their lives were about to change. Andrew started pushing on his eyes, saying, "Daddy, my head hurts." He asked for some Benadryl because he'd been having allergy problems, so Tom put a wet washcloth on his head. This was not a case of allergies, though. Andrew's parents didn't know it at the time, but a clot had stopped the flow of blood on the left side of Andrew's brain. He was having a massive stroke. Tom was bent over talking to him, and when he raised up, he had this look on his face, and it was just pure terror. He said, "I can't get him to respond to me. He won't talk to me." Andrew would throw up and then suck it back in because he was breathing so hard. And it was very scary, his mother said. And I said, "Tom, we need to go to the hospital right now." For the next 2 days, the doctors at Children's Hospital used every tool they had to diagnose Andrew's condition. The blood pressure was normal, temperature was normal, pupils were reactive, his mother said, and then they tried to get him to stand on the scale and his legs just went limp. And he couldn't stand, so they were stunned. They didn't know what was going on. Critical time was passing. Finally, after taking an MRI, Andrew's doctor delivered devastating news. He told them that Andrew was in trouble and that it was really bad. He said Andrew had had a stroke, a really bad stroke. Andrew Franklin says, "I couldn't believe he was telling me that my little boy was about to die because he was fine the other day." David's mother says 2 days before there was nothing wrong with him. It was almost like, this can't be happening. It was almost like watching it on TV. The only hope the doctors offered was a risky brain surgery, rarely performed on children. Dr. Kevin Brinkman from Children's Hospital said Andrew had suffered what we documented was a very large stroke in a big blood vessel in the left side of his brain. And the left side of the brain, for most people, about 95% of people, is the dominant part of the brain that's responsible for most things like speech and language. And at that point in time, Andrew was very critical. And the challenges with Andrew was not only were we working in smaller arteries than were in a normal human being, but now we have even smaller ones because they are inside a child, Dr. Keith Woodward said. I walked over and he was laying on the table and he looked so small, I still could not believe this was happening. He had all of these IVs and they had a cap on his head. And I was just talking to him and I said, "Just don't leave me, please. Come back to me, okay?" We got to kiss him and tell him we loved him. Then the doctor said, "We've got to go." As they rolled Andrew away to the operating room, the only thing Andrew's family and friends could do was pray. Everybody in the room gathered and held hands in a humongous circle and just said a prayer of thanks. And anybody that wanted to pray could pray out loud. With each prayer that we said, it took the sadness and the fear away. It took it completely away. And then it was replaced with love and joy and happiness. At the saddest time in my life, it was the happiest time of my life too, because there is such power in prayer. I've never experienced anything like it, his mother said. 2 hours pass. Andrew survived the surgery, but his prognosis remained grim. The doctor said, even if he survives, most likely he'll be in a wheelchair. He could be blind. He may never walk, may never talk. He will be severely, he won't be the same. I almost just let it go in one ear and out the other because I prayed nonstop, and that's not what God was telling me, his mother said. Andrew spent 2 weeks in intensive care. He was in and out of consciousness, but unresponsive. One of the last nights that he was in intensive care, he was awake, and I noticed he was looking at the TV. And I thought, okay. So I handed him the remote control, and he changed the channel. So I knew he was in there. I knew he was in there, his mother said. Over the next few days, Andrew's recovery progressed dramatically. He began breathing on his own, so the doctor removed his ventilator and then his feeding tube. Soon he was able to speak and move well beyond the expectations of his doctors. His progress was remarkable compared to when I first saw him. He could not talk, he could not speak or understand speech. He could not move his right arm or his right leg at all at that point, Dr. Woodward said. I think it's a miracle that he survived and is doing as well as he is. Within a month of the stroke, Andrew was walking again. And in just 4 months, Andrew met all of his rehabilitation goals. Mobility on his right side continues to improve. He does everything a regular 10-year-old boy could do. He can run, he can swim. He is the strongest one-armed swimmer I've ever seen, his mother says. God has shown me so many things in that short amount of time. I know I can trust him, and he was telling me to trust him. So that's what I did. That's all I had to do was trust him, his mother said. And you know, I hope we're never ever put in a position like that again, but I know that no matter what comes at us, God is there. He will never leave us alone, and he will get us through it, and he will see it through to the other side. Wow, what a fantastic example of the power of prayer. You know, I particularly like what his mother said when the doctor told her that her son might never recover. And she said that she let it go in one ear and out the other ear because that's not what God was telling her. Just another wonderful example of how doctors, they never have the final word. The final word is the man who is our own physician in heaven. He's the one. Anyhow, I'm going to call it a day, I think. The road grader was just coming down the highway. He's done one side, or he's doing one side right now. I just can't count on being able to get to the other side. I'll do a short little pan around before I leave. Thank you very much for joining me today. And may God continue to bless you and yours. Thank you. Bye now. I can't go too far over to the left because my wife's over there. And she doesn't like being in camera. So there we go. Have a great day. Bye now.